What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to do our monthly booster box update video. We're not going to be talking about individual cards at all, but we will be going through every single booster box release up to PRBO2. Not including OP13 yet because it's not technically released, but the next time we do this update video, we will have OP13 in there. Talk a little bit about supply on the secondary market. So if you guys don't know what I do, I've done this a lot with Pokemon this year. I actually have a market spreadsheet where I track Pokemon and One Piece. We look at a bunch of different products and cards. I basically take TCG player value. So for example, the Romance Dawn booster box, $2,584.26. Then we add 20% to that number and we look at the supply on the secondary market below that number. And then also we'll look at sales volume. So how many boxes are actually selling eBay North America over the past 28 days. We divide the sales volume by the amount remaining, and it's going to give us a rough idea of how many days of inventory there are before we should expect that box to reach that level. And again, it's not a perfect science, but the idea is as that days of inventory number gets closer to zero, we're more than likely going to see a box move. And this is kind of where I've said a lot of sets are dead money before. For example, 2 Legends or Royal Blood, just because there was a ton of boxes out there, but they weren't selling very fast. So we'd have basically like 100 to 200 days of inventory remaining. Spoiler alert, that's not the case anymore for basically any set out there, and we will get into it. But yeah, starting off the video, we will look at Romance Dawn, the blue bottom booster boxes. I think there's a couple boxes listed below like $3,100, $3,200, and they are selling, I think, about 0.75 boxes per day. That would be auctions and buy it nows in North America. So not a box per day, but for something that is $2,500, $2,600, some sales up to around $3,000, that's pretty good, honestly, especially for One Piece too. For context, in Pokemon, I guess I can actually show you guys the Pokemon. We'll look at one example. If we go to the XY era over here, and let's go to the most recent update. If I can find, it's probably going to be all the way up here. We can look at something like, I don't know, Primal Clash is about the same price. This is a $3,200 booster box, and there were 11 sales over the past 28 days when I did the update on October 16th. So you actually have more boxes of Romance Dawn moving on a monthly basis than you do Primal Clash, which is basically the same price in Pokemon. You could also look at something like Breakpoint. Only 4 boxes of those sold, whereas in One Piece, when we look at the blue bottoms, there was about, I think, 14 or 15, something like that. And again, I'm not going to give you guys the exact numbers for everything. If you guys are in the spreadsheet, you can go check it out. The update's done. You just come down here to the One Piece BBs tab and you can look at all that. And I think those are numbers that are important to look at, especially if you are considering making purchases into booster boxes in One Piece. But this video is more so just to talk about the general trends that we're seeing across the board in terms of sealed product, because that can also give you guys an idea of where to put your money. So there's blue bottoms. We'll move on to white bottoms. These are actually moving a ton. And if we look at the ROI over the past 12 months, this is probably the best performing sealed booster box in One Piece. I know it says 196%, but that's based off of a $620 market price. This is pretty much a $700 box. And you can see here the most recent sale from today, $779, guys, almost 800 USD. Now, I think this is a lot closer to $700. That's probably going to be a little bit of an outlier sale, but I've been looking at stores in Canada, basically every store that had boxes remaining, which isn't a ton of them. I think like Mint Inc. had some, and then also 401 Games. 401 Games was at like $7.99 Canadian a week ago. I think they're now up to $8.99 or $9.99. Like they've moved their price a lot over the past week, 2 weeks, and I think it's going to continue. I mean, these move fairly well also. I think about 1 per day normally, something like that. And I wouldn't be surprised if sometime next year these are over $1,000. I think that's a fairly conservative estimate. Now, obviously, if the global economy shit hits the fan, throw all that out the window. But I think if things continue business as usual, we will see this get into the 4 figures and become the second sealed booster box to get there. behind the blue bottom version rather. Now moving on to Paramount War. And by the way, I should mention this right now. Basically every set up to, I believe the Memorial Collection was up in terms of price on TCG Player over the past 28 days. A couple of these sets like OP07, 08, I think even like PRB01, those were down a little bit, Royal Blood as well. But your 09, your EB02, these are moving up in price and similar to OP12. And again, we'll get to all of those and talk about specifics here later in the video. Paramount War is interesting because when I was looking at supply, and a lot of what I want to talk about today is available supply for a lot of these sets, but Paramount War was basically one of the only sets, if not the only set, I can't remember exactly, that had more supply this month compared to the prior month out there. And a lot of that has to do with one seller putting up, I think like 4 cases worth of boxes initially at around $265 USD per box. So I think it's going to take a while before we chew through that. Paramount War does not sell that well, especially compared to some of the more popular sets in One Piece. And that's also why for a long time I said that these sets were kind of dead money, right? Like there was a lot of supply out there. They were not selling well. And obviously the price can move on TCG Player. You can see here, we went all the way down to around 190. We're now back up to 230. It was at this price back in April, May of this year. Price can move up and down on TCG Player. That doesn't necessarily mean that the wider market is going to reflect that, because in the case of One Piece on this platform, there's not as many boxes moving. There's not a ton listed. So if there's like 10 to 20 sales moving it upwards, that's great. But you could also have that many sales on eBay that are, I don't know, 10, 15% below that, right? So you really have to pay attention to the wider markets in One Piece, in my opinion. And that's why I do track these. So I think Paramount War, it's going to take a little bit of time just because we do have more inventory on the market for a box like this to hit, I don't know, $300 USD, right? I think that Pillars of Strength, we're basically already there. I know the graph says 280, but if you come in here and look at recent sales, most of them, you're over $300, all the way up to 342 USD. And there's not a ton of this out there listed on eBay either. It's not like there's cases worth of this product. Only a couple boxes listed below, I think like 400 USD on eBay North America. And again, like if you're in Malaysia, Singapore, Australia, Africa, South America, you're using a different platform, Europe obviously, you're probably going to see listings lower than that. Again, this is just the North American market. So I do want to hammer that home for people watching in other parts of the world. Kingdoms of Intrigue, another set that doesn't have a ton of supply out there. A lot of these earlier OP sets, guys, there just aren't that many boxes compared to some of the newer sets. It sells at a decent pace, nothing crazy. I mean, it's probably towards the lower end when we look at a lot of the sets, but just because there aren't a ton of boxes out there, you still have this potential, right? You can see this box was like $185 in June. We're now up into the 240, 250 range. You know, you only need like 10, 15, 20 sales in order for that to happen on some of these older sets. And with the rise of the Boa Hancock SP and then obviously all the manga cards as well, it makes sense why this box is moving up in price. Now, OP05, I think a lot of people are interested about this. There is, I think, more boxes of O5. Again, I talked about Paramount War. O5 was very close. It's either about the same amount of inventory as last month, or maybe like 1 or 2 boxes more. I'd have to go double check. But the thing that's important to note is the last time we did the sealed booster box update, OP05 was about $80 cheaper. So the fact that the same amount of boxes are out there, and also the fact the sell-through rate, sales volume, is about the same as it was last time we did the update, are both telltale signs that this is a very popular box still. It's moving. I don't expect OP05 to slow down unless we do get a product dump on the market. It seems like basically everyone in this hobby is holding their O5 right now. It's very hard to find someone willing to give you a deal on this box. And if all that continues, you're just going to see OP05 continue to move up as time goes on. I fully expect this box, if we don't get a reprint, to be somewhere in the 400s or onwards sometime next year. Wings of the Captain as well. Less inventory on the market compared to the prior 28-day period. Sales volume on Wings of the Captain, I've talked about this multiple times. It's actually surprisingly really strong compared to a lot of the earlier sets from One Piece. And Wings of the Captain, It's definitely not the best set in One Piece. You don't have crazy chase cards that everybody wants to open, but you have the Zoro in there. You have some awesome SPs like the Rebecca, the Buggy, and I think just that alone has been enough to move boxes on the secondary market, but also sitting around $155, $160 currently. It's one of the cheaper boxes out there, especially from the earlier block of One Piece. I know it's not technically part of the first block rotating out, but I would say like the first 6 to 8 sets, a little bit different than what we've been seeing recently from Bandai. So Wings of the Captain, I think it's just going to continue moving similar to this bad boy right here, the Memorial Collection. Again, guys, you know, I've been memeing on EBO1 for 6 months at this point. The first time I brought this up on the channel, some gatekeeper said that once they reprinted all the cards inside of this, the box was going to go to zero, it was going to half overnight, it was going to crash. You know, why would you own a box that if you open it, you don't need the cards, right? Because they're going to be cheaper in PRBO2, blah, blah, blah. Guys, sealed product doesn't work that way. Again, you can go back and watch all the videos. It makes sense why it's held up. It makes sense why it's going to continue moving up in price. If you come look at recent sales, EBO1, sure, you had an outlier sale here, $333. I imagine there was probably shipping on that. But recent sale from today, we're back into the 400s. And a lot of the sales on eBay, you're in that like 380, 390, 400 plus range. And I think that's just going to continue moving as time goes on. Now, moving into a couple sets that haven't been performing as well, 500 years in the future, OP07. This is kind of surprising to me, honestly. I think OP07, it's kind of a waifu set. You have the Boa Hancock manga, you have the Onami SP, you also have some other decent SPs, like there's a Doflamingo in there. I think, what is it, Usohachi or something? I can't remember exactly all the cards in '07, but it does surprise me a set like this hasn't seen basically any growth over the past 6 months. Obviously, we went down and then back up, I think as low as around $100, 108. Yeah, and you can see we jumped up to around 130, sitting around 120. Lots of boxes still moving though. This is a decent selling box. I mean, we're sitting probably around one per day, I'd say, on OP07. And there isn't a ton of supply out there either. I mean, when we look at eBay North America, you maybe have, what, 3 cases, 4 cases worth this? I could be wrong, could be less than that actually too. But I also think a lot of what we've been seeing in One Piece and the market has been concentrated into the better sets like '05, '09, EBO2, Romance Dawn, and things like '07, sure, I think they're great, they'll move with time, but we do just need to give it an extra year or two to really see where this set is ultimately going to end up. Same thing with Two Legends. I mean, I still think this is a really terrible set. It is still kind of dead money. I think when we looked at this a month or two ago, there was like, 200 to 300 days of remaining inventory. We're actually down to, I think, around 50 days. It's crazy the drop in supply of Two Legends over the past month. I think part of that does have to do with some sellers moving their price up. And to put that into context, if the box is $100, 20% more would be $120. If there are sellers that have moved from $115 up to $125, we're now not tracking those boxes. So I think as Two Legends eventually moves up, we'll see more supply come back to the market. I still think there's a lot out there. It's not one of the better selling boxes, even though it's $100, which is very cheap. So if you did want to open some product, this is one of the cheaper ways to go about it. And again, I never want to discourage you guys from owning certain products, investments. If you have something in your collection, I don't want to bash it, but this is not a product that I would hold as an investment. I just think that it's a very weak set and there are way better places to put your money. So moving on, PRBO1, there's less supply out there compared to last month. Sales volume, I think, was exactly the same as last month. So again, we just need to wait, give it time. People are talking about this box moving down in price from $480 to $450, whatever. I mean, the run up on this, we went from $260 to basically $480 overnight. Obviously, you're going to have people coming out of the woodwork at that point, taking some profits. We're going to have to wait for those people who want to sell boxes to get rid of them before we see another climb. But eventually, this box will continue to move up. Having the God Pack in there, the value you can get out of that, also all the Gold Dawns, the shorter print run compared to a lot of these mainline sets. I mean, there's so many things that you can point at for PRBO1 to be a good investment. Super bullish on it long term. Speaking of bullish sets, OP09, this is something that's moved up from last month. We're sitting around $214. Again, same sort of situation. We had a pretty solid run up on this. over the past couple months. I think we're starting to see some people take profits. Maybe there's some restocks coming in as well. Not a ton of supply on eBay North America. And this is actually one of the better moving boxes. I know there's a couple newer sets that are doing better, and then OPO5 I believe is doing better, but then it's OPO9. Like it's right up there as probably, I'd say like top 5 right now. It might be 4th or 5th in terms of sales volume. And again, like the newer sets tend to move better just because it is the hot new thing. It tends to be cheaper. People want to open it. They need cards for their decks, whatever, their collection, master set. And as time goes on, that tends to drop off. But OP9, it's holding strong currently. This is kind of a surprise. Royal Blood, this was dead money for a long time. But now on eBay North America, there's less than a case, I think, of this listed below like $120 USD. I still don't think this is a great set to invest in. Obviously, I pulled the Law manga, so I'm a big fan of the set and just an opening experience. I also like the Whitebeard SP, the Sanjay SP as well is great. But when we just look at the value you can get from some of these cards, I don't think it's a solid investment right now. But it is a fairly cheap box, so if you don't have a ton of money and you want to just get some sealed products on the cheap, this is one of the ones you could potentially go with. Now moving on, EBO2, you guys know I have a solid position in this. I think it's a great set. And I mean, if you look at the graph, just been straight upwards for the past 3 months, and it doesn't seem like we're slowing down anytime soon. Recent sales from today, $236.69, $244.43. I think this is going to be a $240, $250, maybe even $260 box by the end of the year, if not early next year. And when we look at supply on eBay, there's less compared to last month. However, the sales volume was lower, and I think we can expect that probably to continue dropping as the box gets more expensive. It doesn't seem like it's one of the fan favorites to open. And the final couple sets here, we have OP11, a lot less of this on the market this week, or this month rather, compared to last month. But I will say last month when we looked at it, I think about 75 or 80% of the supply was coming from one seller, that was P Football Pete. I don't know if they've taken their boxes off of eBay or they moved their price up. I imagine they probably just did move their price up. This box has been on kind of a journey over the past month or so. We're back down to $139 now. You guys know I'm a big fan of OP11. I do think there is a little bit more out there compared to some of these earlier sets, maybe something like OP7, OP08. I think that the print runs are maybe getting a bit larger. That is just my guess. Again, I don't have solid numbers on that, but just based on what I'm seeing and what it seems with these newer sets, I've talked about this before, OP13, seemed like every store in Canada had way more boxes than normal. So keep an eye on print runs in the future if you can. OP12, Legacy of the Master, we're now up to almost $110 on TCG Player. Kind of surprising. 2 days ago, we were at like $100. And when I clocked this at like 2 a.m. This morning when I was doing the update, or at least when I started it, it was at 106.65 or 106.69, something like that. So we've gone up even further today. It doesn't surprise me. I mean, this box is undervalued in my opinion. It should probably be closer to like $135, $140 currently. And that's just based on the cards inside, but also that it is a newer set and we're likely going to get more in the future. But this is a way better investment in my opinion than something like Royal Blood, even Two Legends, 500 years in the future. I would be passing on all of these and picking up OP12 if given the option between those. I still don't think it's as good of a set as something like OP11. EBO2 I think is better. OPO9 obviously is a way better set, but compared to like the bottom third of One Piece, it's probably a set that stands out among those. And for those of you guys who don't have as much money to invest into One Piece, maybe you live in an area where you can find a deal on OP12. If you can find a case for, I don't know, $1,000, $1,100, even $1,200 at this point, I think it's kind of a no-brainer. Even if reprints come, when we look at this 2, 3, 4 years down the road, you're not going to regret doing that, in my opinion. And then finally, PRBO2, this is the first month that this box was added to the list. Not a ton of supply out there. Like I kind of expected there to be more boxes on eBay. Even when I look at Shopify in Canada and look at a lot of the top stores that do sell One Piece product, they don't have as much right now as I expected them to have about a month after release. So keep an eye on this product. I do think it could be a dark horse. I don't think it's an S tier investment, but I do put it in the A tier. I think it's fairly strong still with all the Gold Dawns And then also the Sanji manga is great. There's a couple other awesome cards in there. But that's going to be it for the update this month. We'll do this again in 28 days. If you guys, again, if you have access, you can go into the spreadsheet and check all the numbers are done. If you guys want to get access, link in the description down below. You can use the code ONEPIECE, 30% off all plans. And then when we do get to 5,000 subscribers, which I think will happen either this weekend or hopefully sometime next week, we'll give away lifetime access to one of you guys again, because honestly, I appreciate you guys so much. The growth and support on this channel has been insane over the past month. And my pledge to you guys is that I'm going to continue doing my best to bring you quality content and information about investing in One Piece and just not hold back. I know there's some people on YouTube that are quite fake and they don't really have super strong opinions on things. I know I say some things that ruffle a lot of feathers, and I don't want to change. I want to be authentic and just say what I think, even if a lot of people disagree, because if I can't get on here and say things I genuinely believe in, then how are any of you guys supposed to believe me? So with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching the video. We will be back hopefully Saturday, I think. I might take a break tomorrow from uploading on this channel. We'll have to wait and see. It's Game 6, Blue Jays. It's also Halloween, so I'm sure we'll be passing out candy and stuff to kids coming around. So we'll see if I can get to an upload. If not, we'll be back on Saturday. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Stay safe wherever you are in the world, and I'll catch you in the next one.